I hired a plumber to fix a leak at my daughter-in-law's house while she and my son were away in Cancun. 2 hours later, he called me with his voice cracking. "Sir, I think you need to come down here right now. There's a little boy hiding behind the water heater. He won't come out." I drove there faster than I've ever driven in my life, and what I uncovered ripped my family in half. Before I tell you the rest, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from tonight. My name is Walter Brennan. I'm 67 years old, and I live in a quiet little neighborhood just outside of Asheville, North Carolina. For 41 years, I worked as a pediatric emergency room nurse at Mission Hospital. 41 years of holding scared children's hands while doctors stitched them up, of explaining to terrified parents that their kid was going to be okay, and sometimes on the worst nights, of sitting with families when the news wasn't good. I retired 3 years ago. People ask me if I miss it. The truth is, I miss the kids. I don't miss what I learned to see. You spend that long in pediatric emergency, you develop a sixth sense. You can tell which bruises came from a fall off a bike, and which ones came from a closed fist. You learn the way a child's eyes drift toward the parent before answering a question. You learn to read silence. I always told myself I'd never have to use that knowledge inside my own family. I was wrong about that. My boy is named Caleb. He's 34 now, my only child. His mother, my wife Diane, passed away from ovarian cancer 11 years ago, and after she was gone, it was just the two of us for a while. Caleb works as a regional manager for an auto parts distributor, makes decent money, drives a black pickup truck he washes every Saturday. He used to call me every Sunday evening like clockwork. "Hey, Pop, just checking in." We'd talk about the Panthers game, about a fishing trip we were thinking about nothing in particular. Just a father and son keeping the line open. That changed when he met Brittany Carlisle 5 years ago. She was 29, divorced, had a degree in marketing she never seemed to use, and she had what people around here politely call presence. Loud laugh, expensive purses, the kind of woman who walks into a room and rearranges it without asking. The first Thanksgiving I had them over at my place, she spent the whole afternoon on her phone, scrolling and tapping. When I asked if she wanted to help carve the turkey, she looked at me like I'd asked her to butcher it in the front yard. Caleb married her 8 months later at some resort in Cabo. I wasn't invited to the rehearsal dinner. I told myself it was just the way young people do things now. I told myself a lot of things. 3 years ago, I made what I thought was a kind gesture. I owned a 4-bedroom brick ranch over on Linden Avenue, the house Caleb grew up in. After Diane died, it was too quiet, too full of her. I'd been talking about selling it and moving into something smaller for years, so I told Caleb and Brittany they could move in rent-free while they got on their feet. I kept the deed in my name, partly because my lawyer Frank told me to, and partly because 41 years of watching families fall apart had taught me that nothing protects love like paperwork. "Pop, you're the best," Caleb said, hugging me hard the day I gave him the keys. "We won't forget this. I want you to know that. People say a lot of things in moments like that. Most of those things have a shelf life." The Sunday calls stopped within 6 months. The visits to my place came down to Christmas Eve and my birthday, and then just my birthday, and then a card in the mail with Brittany's loopy handwriting on the envelope. Whenever I suggested coming by Linden Avenue, there was always a reason. Brittany was redoing the living room. Caleb had a work thing. The dog was sick, even though they didn't have a dog. After a while, I stopped suggesting. A father can only knock on a closed door so many times before he starts to feel like a stranger asking for change. So when my phone rang on a Tuesday morning in early September, and Caleb's name lit up the screen, I almost didn't recognize the picture. It had been 4 months since we'd spoken. "Hey, Pop, listen. I need a hand with something. No, how are you? No, how have you been?" Just straight to the ask. The way somebody who already knows the answer is going to be yes, asks for things. "What's going on, son?" Brittany and I are flying out to Cancun this Saturday. 8 days at this all-inclusive place she's been wanting to try. The thing is, the kitchen sink's been backed up for a week, and there's a slow leak under the upstairs bathroom that's starting to spot the ceiling. "Could you call a plumber for us? Get it sorted while we're gone? I'll Venmo you back when we get home, promise." I sat at my kitchen table looking at the half-finished crossword in front of me. 8 days in Cancun, and they couldn't even spare a plumber's appointment, but they could call me when they needed something done. "I don't have a key to your house anymore, Caleb. I gave the spare back when you asked." Right. I'll leave one under the planter on the porch, the gray one with the dead succulent in it. Just have him come Sunday morning. The plumbing's gonna get worse, if it sits. Why don't you have someone come by today? before you leave. I just feel better doing it while we're gone, Pop. We don't want to deal with the noise and the mess. You know how Brittany gets. I knew how Brittany got. I knew how Caleb had started letting how Brittany got become the explanation for everything. I told him I'd handle it. He said, "Thanks, Dad, you're a lifesaver," and the line went dead. No goodbye, no I love you. Just the soft little click of a man who got what he came for and didn't owe me anything else. I sat there for a long time, the morning light coming through the kitchen window, and I thought about how strange it was that he wanted me involved with the house only when nobody he cared about was home. I called a man named Hector Alvarez. Hector did the plumbing work at Mission Hospital for years before he started his own company. Good man, 3 kids, prays before he eats. We'd kept in touch the way people do when they like each other but don't make time, Christmas cards and a beer at the hospital fundraiser every spring. He picked up on the second ring. "Walter, you old coyote, tell me you're calling about a fishing trip." I told him what I needed. He said he could do Sunday morning, no problem, and he'd give me the friends and family rate. I gave him the address. Sunday morning, I drove over to Linden Avenue early and let myself in with the key from under the planter. The house I'd raised my son in didn't feel like the house I'd raised my son in anymore. Everything was painted some shade of off-white that Brittany probably had a fancy name for. The walls were covered with framed photographs of the two of them at beaches, at concerts, in front of restaurants. There must have been 30 pictures in that hallway alone. Not one of Diane, not one of me, not one of Caleb as a boy. It was like the first 31 years of his life had been edited out of the family album. I walked through the rooms making sure things were unlocked for Hector, the kitchen, the upstairs bathroom, the basement where the water heater sat in the corner. The basement door was at the end of the hallway, and when I tried the handle, it was locked. Not a deadbolt. One of those little pin locks you can pop with a paper clip. I stared at it. Who locks a basement door in their own house? Hector pulled into the driveway in his work truck right then, and I told myself I'd ask Caleb about it later. I unlocked the basement with a hairpin from the bathroom drawer and showed Hector around. He said he'd be a few hours. I told him to call me when he was done so I could lock up. Then I drove home and tried to forget the locked door and the missing photographs and the feeling I couldn't shake, the one I used to get walking into hospital rooms where the parents wouldn't quite look at the chart. I was in my workshop at about 11:30, sharpening a chisel when my phone rang. Hector, Walter. His voice wasn't right. Hector was the kind of man who joked through everything. I once watched him crack-wise while a busted pipe sprayed sewage up the wall of the hospital cafeteria. The voice on the phone was not that man's voice. "Walter, I think you need to come down here right now. There's a little boy hiding behind the water heater. He won't come out. He won't talk to me. I need you to come." I dropped the chisel. "What did you say?" "I went down to the basement to check the heater because the leak might be running down from the upstairs bath, and there's a kid down here, Walter. Maybe 4, 5 years old. He was behind the heater on a pile of blankets when I moved a box. I scared him. He scared me. Walter, please come. I don't know what to do. Don't move. I'm coming. Don't try to get him out. Just sit on the basement steps where he can see you and talk soft. I'll be there in 15 minutes. I drove that 15 minutes in 9. The kind of 9 that you don't remember afterward, just the squeal of brakes and the blur of mailboxes and the cold, heavy stone in your chest that you recognize from 100 ER nights when somebody's child was on the way and you didn't know yet what shape they'd be in when they arrived. Hector was waiting on the front porch. No toolbox, no hat. Just standing there with his hands shoved in his pockets like he'd forgotten what they were for. "He's still down there," he said. I gave him a juice box from my truck. He drank the whole thing in one go. Walter, that boy. I work on a lot of houses. I don't know what I'm seeing here. I told him to wait upstairs. I went down those basement steps slow, one at a time, the way you go down them when the body of work behind you is 41 years of children who flinched at sudden movements. The basement was finished, sort of. Carpet on the floor, drywall painted gray, a futon shoved against one wall under a small high window. The water heater was in the back corner behind a half wall of cinder block. I came around it slow. He was sitting cross-legged on a folded comforter that had been wedged into the gap between the heater and the back wall. A little boy. Skinny in a way that takes a while to get to, the kind of skinny where you can see the shape of the collarbone through the t-shirt. His hair was light brown and uneven, like somebody had cut it with kitchen scissors. He had on a pair of pajama pants printed with dinosaurs, and a gray t-shirt that was too big and stained at the hem. There was a small flashlight next to him, a coloring book missing most of its pages, 3 crayons, and a plastic bowl with the dried orange ring of macaroni and cheese inside. He looked up at me, and I saw it. I saw it the way I'd seen it 100 times across a triage desk. The flat, watchful eyes, the body held still, the breath shallow and quiet and trained. This was a child who had been taught not to be a problem. I crouched down about 6 feet from him, lower than his eye line, and I put my hands flat on the carpet so he could see them. "Hi there, buddy. My name's Walter. I'm not going to come any closer than this, okay? I'm just going to sit right here for a minute." He didn't move. He didn't blink. "The man upstairs who scared you, his name is Hector. He's a friend of mine. He didn't know you were down here. Nobody's mad at you. I promise. Are you hungry? Are you thirsty? I can get you anything you want." He stared at me for what felt like a long time. Then his lower lip started to tremble, and his eyes filled up, but he didn't make a sound. I'd seen that too. Children who have learned not to cry out loud. "Are you supposed to stay quiet, sweetheart?" A small nod. "Who told you to stay quiet?" "Brittany." The name landed in my chest like a hammer. He said it the way other kids might say the name of a teacher they were afraid of. Without the word mom, without the word aunt. Just Brittany. Plain as bone. "Can you tell me your name?" Another long pause. "Eli." "Eli, that's a good name. How old are you, Eli?" "I'm 4. I'll be 5 at Christmas." "Eli, can I ask you something? And you don't have to answer if you don't want to. Whose house is this?" "Caleb and Brittany's." His voice was a little stronger now. "Caleb is my dad sometimes." The room went very quiet. "Sometimes?" "When he comes home from the trips, he says, 'Hi, Eli,' and sometimes he gives me a Snickers. The trips are when the people are here, so I have to be downstairs." "The people." "What people, Eli?" "Brittany's friends. They come over with the cameras and the lights, and they take pictures in the kitchen and the living room. Brittany says I'm not allowed to be in the pictures because I'm not part of the brand." I had to sit down then. Right there on the basement carpet, 6 feet from this child, I had to put my hand flat on the floor to keep from tipping over. I'd been a nurse 41 years. I thought I'd seen the bottom of what people do. I had not seen this bottom. "Eli, sweetheart, when did you last eat?" He thought about it. "Brittany made me sandwiches in the little fridge before they left. There's still some, and juice boxes. She said the sandwiches are for 2 days each. The little fridge, there was a mini fridge tucked under the basement steps, the kind college kids buy. I hadn't even noticed it. "Eli, when do they come back?" "When the calendar gets to the red circle." He pointed at the wall. There was a printed paper calendar tacked above the futon. Today's date had a smiley face in pencil. 8 days from now had a circle drawn around it in red marker. 8 days. 8 days of pre-made sandwiches in a mini fridge and a flashlight and a coloring book missing most of its pages. "Eli, can I ask one more thing? When Mommy or who lives here with you?" My voice was shaking and I hated it because I knew he could hear it. "The lady, Brittany, and Caleb sometimes. My mom went to heaven a long time ago. I was little. I don't remember her." Brittany said, "I belonged to Caleb because of the papers." "The papers?" The cold thing in my chest got colder. "Eli, would it be okay if I picked you up and we went upstairs and I got you a real meal? You don't have to stay behind the heater anymore." He looked at me with those wary little eyes. "Will Brittany be mad?" "I will personally make sure Brittany is never mad at you again for as long as you live." "Do you trust me to do that?" He thought about it. He was 4 years old, and he was actually weighing whether to trust me. He nodded. I held out my hands. He came to me on his own. He weighed almost nothing. I carried him up the basement steps, and Hector was standing in the kitchen with tears running down his face. A man I'd watched fix a sewer line ankle deep in the worst of it, and he was crying because he knew what I knew. I sat Eli at the kitchen table and made him a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, the only thing I could find in the cabinets that wasn't Brittany's pre-portioned macro food in glass containers. Hector poured him a glass of milk. The boy ate that sandwich the way starving men in old movies eat. Then he ate another one. While he ate, I called 911. I gave them the address. I told them I was a retired pediatric ER nurse, and I had a malnourished child, possible long-term neglect, possible unlawful confinement. I requested a unit and a CPS rapid response. The dispatcher knew the codes I was using because nurses use those codes. Then I called my friend Renee Holcomb, who runs the pediatric trauma team at Mission. "Renee, I need you to take a personal patient for me today." She didn't ask why. She said, "Bring him." The Buncombe County deputy who showed up first was a young woman named Officer Patel. Calm, careful, exactly what I would have hoped for. The CPS investigator came 20 minutes after, a man in his 50s named Dale Whitfield, who I had crossed paths with maybe a dozen times in my career. "Walter," he said. When he saw me, "What are we looking at?" I told him. "The basement. The mini-fridge. The calendar. The sandwiches portioned out. The flashlight. The fact that Eli had to be quiet for the cameras. The fact that the boy had told me his stepmother said he wasn't part of the brand." Dale's face didn't change much. People in our line of work, our faces stopped changing after a while. He just took it down, every word. Then he and Officer Patel went down to the basement and photographed everything. The half-eaten bowl of macaroni, the calendar with the red circle, the gap behind the water heater where a 4-year-old had been told to live for 8 days at a stretch. Eli rode in my truck to Mission Hospital because they let him, because he'd already had enough strangers for one day. Renee met us at the side entrance with a wheelchair he didn't need and a stuffed elephant he very much did. She took him gently and looked at me over his head, and her eyes told me everything before the labs came back. They kept him overnight. The medical findings were exactly what my hands had already told me. Significant malnutrition. Vitamin D deficiency consistent with prolonged lack of sunlight. Untreated dental decay in 3 teeth. A partially healed green stick fracture in his left forearm that had set itself crooked because nobody had taken him to a doctor. No record of pediatric care of any kind in over 2 years. No school enrollment, no immunizations past age 2. As far as the state of North Carolina was concerned, Eli Brennan had simply stopped existing in 2023. While the doctors worked, I sat in the family waiting room with Dale and pieced it together with him. Eli's mother, a young woman named Sarah Whitman, had been Caleb's girlfriend for about 2 years before he met Brittany. She'd died of an opioid overdose when Eli was 18 months old. Caleb had been awarded full custody. There was a survivor benefit from Sarah's Social Security and a small trust that her own mother, Eli's grandmother, had set up before passing the following year. About $1,400 a month deposited into an account in Eli's name with Caleb as the custodian. I had Dale pull the bank records that afternoon. The withdrawals matched almost to the dollar. The lease payments on Brittany's white Range Rover and the recurring charges from a place called Coastal Aesthetic Skin and Wellness. Caleb had a son, my grandson. He was 4 years old. He had been alive for 4 years and I had not known his name. They had hidden him in my own house, the house I'd given them, in the basement where my workbench used to be, where I'd taught Caleb how to sand a piece of pine and stain it without leaving runs. They had taken the money meant to keep that little boy in clothes and shoes in pediatricians' offices, and they had spent it on a leased SUV and laser facials. And when they wanted to vacation in Cancun for 8 days, they had stocked a mini-fridge with 8 days of sandwiches and locked a 4-year-old behind a water heater and called me to send a plumber to the house so that nothing would smell wrong when they got back. I drove home from the hospital at 1 a.m. after Eli fell asleep with my finger gripped in his fist. I sat at my kitchen table in the dark, 41 years of nursing. I had watched parents get charged. I had testified in custody cases. I had sat next to detectives at hearings and given them the medical timeline that put people in prison. I knew exactly which doors to knock on and which forms to file and which words to use to make a system that moves slow start moving fast. My son had no idea who his father actually was. He had spent the last 5 years treating me like a wallet with opinions. He was about to find out. The next morning at 7:00 a.m., I was on the phone with Dale Whitfield filing for emergency kinship placement by 9:00 a.m. I had a meeting with a family law attorney named Margaret Orozco, whose retainer was steep and whose reputation was steeper. By noon I had a list: photographs of the basement, diagrams of the gap behind the heater, Hector's signed statement, the 911 call recording, Officer Patel's incident report, Dale's preliminary CPS findings, the medical workup from Mission, the bank records showing every withdrawal Caleb had made from Eli's account in the last 26 months, the DMV record of the Range Rover, the Coastal Aesthetic invoices. Brittany's Instagram archived page by page every sponsored post that had been filmed in the kitchen above where Eli had been hiding. Margaret looked at it all, spread across her conference table at the end of the second day, and she said, "Mr. Brennan, in 22 years of family law, I have rarely seen a case build itself this neatly. We are going to bury them. I want kinship placement converted to permanent guardianship. I want Caleb's parental rights terminated. I want criminal referrals to the district attorney for child neglect, child endangerment, and embezzlement of a minor's funds. And I want Brittany charged as a co-perpetrator under the same statutes. Margaret smiled the way prosecutors smile. She said, all of that is on the table. Caleb called me from Cancun the next morning. The Mexican federal police had paid him a polite visit at his resort at the request of the State Department, because that's what happens when there's an active CPS investigation and a child welfare hold and an open criminal file in the United States with your name on it. Dad. His voice was a long way from the voice he used when he wanted a plumber. Dad, what did you do? What I did, son, was answer my phone when a plumber called me crying. What you did is something I am still trying to understand. You can't take my kid, he's mine. The papers say he's mine. The papers, Caleb, are what's about to bury you. He started yelling. I heard Brittany behind him, screeching about lawyers and reputation and Instagram. I held the phone away from my ear until they were done, and then I put it back. Listen to me very carefully, son. You are going to come home. You are going to walk into the Buncombe County Sheriff's Office, and you are going to surrender yourself for questioning. You are not going to set foot on Linden Avenue. The locks were changed yesterday afternoon by my locksmith, because that house is in my name, and you are now a person under criminal investigation by the state of North Carolina for the abuse of a minor in my property. If you want a lawyer, you'd better hire one before your plane lands. And one more thing. Don't ever, ever, in this life or the next, call that little boy by his last name in front of me again. He was Eli Whitman the day his mother died, and he is Eli Whitman the day I take him out of your hands. The last thing you took from him was the only thing his mother left him. You are going to give it back. The line went dead. The next 9 months were a war fought in courtrooms and CPS offices, and the Mission Hospital Pediatric Clinic where Eli got his teeth fixed and his arm rebroken and reset, and a vaccination schedule started from scratch. I slept on the couch of my little house and gave him my bedroom. I bought him a real bed, a comforter with planets on it, a nightlight shaped like a mushroom, a closet full of clothes that fit. I enrolled him in pre-K at a small Montessori school, where the teacher cried the first time she saw his intake paperwork, and then never let him see her cry again. I learned to cook 3 meals a day for a child instead of 1 a day for an old man. I learned the difference between regular Cheerios and the kind a 4-year-old will actually eat. I sat on the kitchen floor with him, and we drew pictures with the new crayons I bought, the kind in the big yellow box, all 64 colors, because nobody was ever going to ration crayons in front of this kid again. Caleb and Brittany lawyered up, of course. They tried to claim it was a misunderstanding, that Eli had hidden himself, that the basement was just where he liked to play. The judge, a woman named Judge Antoinette Reeves, who had spent her own career as a child advocate before the bench, listened to that argument with a face that could have curdled milk. She terminated Caleb's parental rights at the conclusion of the 3rd hearing. She granted me permanent guardianship and approved my petition for adoption. Brittany pled out to 2 years, and a felony record that she will carry into every job interview for the rest of her life. Caleb took his case to trial because his lawyer told him he might beat it. He did not beat it. He got 4.5 years in state prison for child neglect and felony embezzlement of his son's federal benefits and trust funds. The judge, when she sentenced him, said one sentence I will carry to my grave. She said, "Sir, you starved your child while you were eating shrimp." The Range Rover was repossessed. The Instagram brand that Brittany had spent 4 years building collapsed in 3 days when the local paper ran the story. The sponsors dropped her one by one. The followers turned on her with the kind of fury the internet specializes in. Last I heard, she was working a register at a gas station outside Hendersonville and not allowed within 500 feet of any child. As for Linden Avenue, I sold it. I couldn't go back in there without seeing the gap behind the water heater. I used the money to put a real down payment on a small 2-bedroom cottage with a fenced yard for Eli, near a good elementary school, a 5-minute walk from a park with a swing set he wore out within a month. It's been a 1.5 years now. Eli turned 6 last Christmas. He weighs what a 6-year-old should weigh. His arm healed straight the 2nd time. He laughs out loud now, which is something he didn't do for the first 3 months he lived with me. And the first time I heard it, I had to walk into the kitchen and pretend to look for something in the refrigerator so he wouldn't see his grandfather cry. He calls me Pop, the name his father used to call me before his father forgot. He sleeps with the mushroom nightlight on. He has a best friend in his kindergarten class named Marcus who comes over for pancakes on Saturdays. His teacher tells me he is smart and kind and a little protective of the smaller kids, which doesn't surprise me. He doesn't ask about Caleb. He used to, in the early months. In the quiet way, he asked everything. Then one night he told me, "Pop, I think you're my dad now." And I told him, "Sweetheart, I am whatever you need me to be, for as long as you need me." He nodded the way a 4-year-old nods at something he has already decided, and he never asked again. People sometimes ask me if I regret it. Calling 911 on my own son, tearing my family apart, putting my own boy in prison. I tell them the truth. My family was already torn apart. It was torn apart the day my son let his wife put a child behind a water heater because he wasn't part of the brand. I didn't tear it apart, I just stopped pretending I couldn't see it. I spent 41 years of my life learning how to read what scared children were trying not to say. The day I retired, I thought I was done with that work. Turned out the most important case of my career was waiting for me in my own basement, in the house where I'd raised my own boy. I did the work one more time. I'm glad I still knew how. If you've made it this far, do me one favor. Go hug a kid in your life. Look them in the eye. Listen to what they aren't saying. The world is full of Ellis. Some of them are behind water heaters and some of them are in plain sight. And the only thing that gets them out is somebody who is paying attention. Be that somebody. And if you want to hear what happened the first time Caleb wrote to me from prison asking for forgiveness and what I wrote back, hit subscribe because that's the next story I'm going to tell. Good night from North Carolina. Hug your grandkids. Tell them they're part of the brand.